Good afternoon and welcome to the latest edition of the Men's Health Month with Vitality. My name is Jamie and I am part of the coaching team, and hopefully you've seen me before. Hopefully you've been to some of our events before. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Today's conversation is a really important one, and we've got a very special guest to talk about it with us. I think that the context of men's mental health is something that's been spoken about a lot more recently, which is a phenomenal thing. And that's a conversation that we want to continue today. I think there's a lot of expectations with society in terms of men having a certain role, and that perception comes with pressures. And I think that's something that I've felt, and Tom, our guest as well, has felt that too. And we really wanted to be quite open and honest today. So the first thing that I would say is, please do get involved in this conversation, because there's a lot of input that everyone can have. And I think that we all have a role to play in kind of unraveling that stigma a little bit. So the kind of questions that we want to know is, what happens when your personality doesn't necessarily meet expectations? How do you feel? What sort of things can we look out for, and how can we support each other? And it's really cool for us today to be joined by Tom McLelland, who is the head of UK athletic training at Virgin Active. He's also a talent trainer at Techno Gym. But as well as that, he's got 20 years of experience in the health and wellbeing industry. He's passionate, and he also speaks phenomenally well about mental wellbeing and has a lot of really interesting experiences. So Tom, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's a privilege.
It's a pleasure.
You've made me look very small already on camera, so you can tell he's in the fitness.
I'm going to move back at here.
Yeah. Tom's actually 2 meters behind me right now. We've got so much interesting stuff to cover today, and Tom's story is a really, really interesting one. And I think the thing that I want to try and do and bring this back to is how exercise is so much more than just exercise. And that's exactly what Tom's passion and goal is. And all I'm here to do is kind of bring the story along, but also I'm going to try and be as open and honest as I can as well, because I think as a male, it'd be easy for me just to ask you the questions. But actually the point is that everyone can be more honest. So Tom, you've got a lot of experience in this field. You've done some really, really cool things. You're someone who's well-traveled, is not shy to kind of take on new challenges. But I was really interested, and again, for context, to start really at the beginning, your childhood. And what I'm interested in as well is like your reason for why you wanted to get into fitness in the first place.
Yeah, so I was just always a really sporty kid, whether that be kind of track athletics, boxing, but I was, more than anything, I just had a lot of energy. And the original thing for me is I wanted to become a graphic designer. I always wanted to become an artist. Okay. And that was kind of my original goal. But the idea of sort of sitting at a desk and being behind a computer all day just never excited me. And actually my first job in a gym was, I got interviewed for a membership sales at an Esporta. And I was young, I was 18, I think, really young. And you know, being like coming from a sporting background, being interested in boxing, being interested in rugby, football, and just having this energy, for me, it seemed like a natural progression to go into coaching. So I took a PT certification, and that's sort of where it all started for me. At the ripe age of, I think, 18, 19 years old.
I didn't want to give away your age.
I'm happy. I'm 39 years old, and I'm proud of it. Absolutely proud of it. Yep, absolutely stronger than ever. Yeah.
Amazing. And I think the thing that I really resonate with there is how the sales role in gym work is massive. Like you're selling, whether you're doing it as a sales role for memberships or your services, it's a big sales element. So what made you stick with it for as long, you know, like there's something within it? So was it the sales element? Was it the personal element? Like what is it that gets you up every day and wants you to continue to do this?
I think right at the beginning, it was, I don't think I had a proper understanding of it. I always tell this story because I think it's really funny. I started out at a gym, Esporta. Our idea of exercise and wellness and nutrition was so skewed. I mean, there was a bar inside of the gym where we'd go and we'd train, and then in the evening you'd eat a jack of potato and baked beans and tuna, and that was your kind of healthy meal. And you know, but you'd be out every weekend, you'd still be drinking and doing all these things that are terrible for your mental health and for your well-being. But it was just kind of, it wasn't an understanding. You're young, you just want to have fun with it. And I did different things. I went off and tried different things. I think I tried to become an estate agent once or something
Wow.
terrible like that. But I always kind of went back to fitness. It was always the thing that I wanted to go back to. And it was when I was about 24 years old that I moved out to America and kind of restarted and properly. I didn't restart because I was doing it beforehand, but when I went out to America, it was when I was 24. It was that was when I really wanted to get into fitness properly and understand it properly.
Yeah.
You know.
So with that, because I think this is something that we'll pick up throughout. I personally think you've got an amazing. I don't know if it's innate in you, but you've got the courage to just take action on things. And so at the age of 24, having worked in the industry for 5 or 6 years, probably got a good understanding of it, you decided to turn that around and you just left for America to properly focus, like you say. What is it that you find so comfortable with that change? Because you seem to be able to just, I'm going to do it, and then you actually stand by your action.
I don't know what it's something innate in me that just, it's probably a genetic thing. I think my mum was always really enterprising. My dad was the same. He always had his own businesses. So I grew up with an element of that. My mum invented something called an egg cracker and separator, and it was like she worked on it for years. And you know, I remember just not really understanding. I look back on it now, and I look up to it, and I look up to the way that she was, because to go out and you know, even just start your own business or invent something and try and do something for yourself, it was kind of, you know, I think that's in me. And it wasn't until I left, when I went to go out to America, I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew that I wasn't happy in the UK doing what I was doing, because it was just a revolving door of, you know, you're training, doing those things. I didn't know why I was going to the gym, really. I think the culture back then was, I mean, this is 2003, 2004. I did the traveling thing. I went to Thailand and did the Southeast Asia route in, you know, 2003, 2004. And then I kind of came back from that, and I didn't really know what direction I wanted to take my life. And so I decided one day just to sort of ship out and go to America. I had no plan. I think that was the start of it. Before then, I wasn't aware that I was that type of person. But after I did that, I realized that it was in me, that if I wanted something, I'd just go and do it, take action.
Do you think that potentially comes from finding it difficult to know where you fit in? Because you tried a lot of different things and they didn't quite seem to align with you. So you thought, I'm going to change it completely. I'm going to try something.
Yeah, I think there's an element of that. Yeah. I like to say, you know, people always think you got it figured out. And people think you need to have it figured out by the time you're 30 years old. And you know, after COVID and you know, another direction career change for me, 39 years old, had to kind of reroute again. You think you got it all figured out, but you don't have it figured out. So I think there's an element of that, not knowing exactly, for me anyway, just exactly which direction I wanted to take my life. I didn't know where I wanted to be on the fitness scene, because back then I think the fitness scene was so new, really. In the UK it was anyway. And then if you went to the US, when I went out there, it was a few years ahead, I'd say. But like CrossFit hadn't even started at that point. You know, and I went out there and opened my own gym. And I opened this kind of strength and conditioning hybrid boxing gym. We trained young amateur boxers, Golden Glove boxers, but we also had your 65-year-old grandma who just wanted to come in and learn how to box. And that's not even a joke. Her name was Beanie Riddle, right? Great name. And she would come in and just throw hands on the bag next to these sort of 16-year-old kids who were going and fighting in regional tournaments. You know, so that to me was, I knew, I kind of had I think I had a vision a little earlier than most people in that industry, that there was more to life, more to exercise, than just kind of an aesthetic. It was, my gym was called Fight for Your Life. It was Fight for Your Life boxing. It was boxing and fitness, I should say. And I wanted to create this idea that everyone has a different reason or a different thing that they're fighting for. You might be fighting for, you know, just to lose weight. You might be fighting to be, you know, to live a little longer, to hang around with your grandkids or whatever it might be. You might be fighting to become a world championship boxer. whatever it was, would give you a home to do that. So I didn't realize at the time how, I think I was so forward thinking.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that in the time. Actually, it didn't quite work.
So you were too far ahead.
I think I was too far ahead.
I always
you know
that as soon as I met you.
And that sounds like a humble brag, right? But I think, but it took me sort of failing a business. It didn't work out.
Really?
You know, I had to pack it in, and it took failing that business, and you know, I had to sit at that point again. I mean, I was in a place called Utah, in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I left there and moved to New York City, and I left that business after working on it for 4 years and didn't make anything out of it. I mean, I literally I was penniless. I had enough money to kind of get myself over the country to New York and start again.
Wow. And so it's funny, by the way, what you were saying about like figuring things out and stuff at a certain age. Like, I always thought this as a kid, you look up to adults and you think, at what point will I know what I'm doing and how this all works? And I'm 29 and that's never happened. So I don't think it probably ever does.
Yeah.
Just the final part of this stage before we move on to the next sort of chapter of your life. Moving to New York, what was that like for you? Because I imagine you're from London, right?
Yeah.
So Utah, pretty extreme change. Didn't necessarily loved what you were doing, but maybe it wasn't right for the time and the place. New York, what was your focus there? Was it about getting back into the hustle and sort of that lifestyle?
I think so. It's funny because when I moved to Utah, coming from the UK, Utah was all clean living, right? It was like, you know, mountain sports, skiing, snowboarding, health, wellness. There was a big drive towards that. And we were also, I think, in the US, they were a few years ahead of the UK. And I say that like in that place was where I really started my, you know, real understanding of fitness and what it actually was, how to eat properly, you know, nutrition. My kind of knowledge of nutrition prior to that was very limited.
Yeah. It
was very much like a protein and potatoes type thing.
Yeah.
And then I went out there and I started to meet people who understood nutrition a little more. Mm-hmm. I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. And actually eating this way makes you feel better.
Yeah.
But there was still an element that kind of would always drag you back, where you'd still have that kind of partying and you'd still do the things that you probably shouldn't be doing. And I don't think my headspace I wasn't in the right place. And I was also trying to make it.
Yeah.
And at the expense of, you know, my mental health. And it was because I was constantly worried about money. I mean, I found myself with that business at one point, kind of, I couldn't get enough money together to get myself into another apartment. And so I was sleeping, I had a dog at the time, I was sleeping in the gym for like a month or so.
Stuff, that, isn't it? You see these things, you don't actually think.
It was it was challenging, but I was so desperate to make it. I didn't want to come back and say that I hadn't done it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, staying in, you know, like motels and stuff, just because I could pay for like a week at a time, and until I kind of made enough money through the business so I could put a deposit on an apartment.
Yeah.
And so when I decided, like, it was a big thing for me to actually say, do you know what? I can't do this anymore. I have to move on. And when I moved to New York, it was almost like that was just a step closer to home.
Right.
It was like, right, I'll go to New York, and if I can make it in New York, then I'll stay in New York.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I'll try and get home.
Sure, that makes sense.
But I had a dog as well, and I was so scared. I didn't want to leave her behind. I would have never left her behind. It was like, you know, that was always on the forefront of my mind as well. And that sounds crazy, but that was like a dog owner,
isn't it? Yeah. Everyone is a dog owner.
So that was a big thing with that. You know, going back to New York, when I landed there, it felt more like home. And I thought, right, I can navigate this landscape a little more, a little better. Than because I'm a city boy. I grew up in London, so this, you know, coming from the mountains and, you know, that.
You didn't do it by halves. It took so long to change your life.
Exactly.
It's funny what you say though, because I think, again, from like a men's mental health perspective, I'm someone that's always been interested and involved in sport, and so if you give me the choice of going out and having some drinks and having a good time, don't get me wrong, with friends, and not being able to wake up in the morning feeling fresh and do my workout, or staying in, getting a good night's sleep and feeling good, like I love feeling good, then I would choose to go out with my friends, and I don't want to do that. And so that makes me like, I'm fitting in to something that I don't really want to fit in with because I think it's the right thing to do. And there's that sort of FOMO element. But every time I've gone out, it's never offered me anything different than I know it's going to offer.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I know what it's going to be. I'm going to get tired because I don't drink like everyone else. It's going to be really loud, and I'm going to spend a load of money, and I'm going to think the whole time, I probably wouldn't want to be doing this. But you do it because it fits with that norm. And social norms are a challenge, I think, for all men, whereby you want to fit in, and if everyone else is doing it, you kind of compromise your own well-being. So with you obviously being so driven and determined, did you manage to stay strong in your own beliefs and do your own thing, or did you still get drawn back into the jacket potatoes and the drinking culture?
When I was in New York, I'd say that the 6 years that I was there were probably the unhealthiest 6 years of my life. Because although I was training a lot and I was probably eating better, there was no recovery. I wasn't sleeping enough. There was a lot of stress. Living in a place like that, I never took my foot off the pedal once. I remember going a full year and then looking back and going, I think I've only taken about 5 days off work in that whole year. And that would have been a Sunday, when I might have even gone and done one client on a Sunday morning. So it wasn't a full day off.
Yeah.
My feet never touched the ground, and it was so that I could afford to live in this place. And also I was so scared to leave and come back to the UK and say, right, I've failed. In my head, I thought it was a failure to come back to the UK. And I pushed probably harder than I should have done to stay there. And there were many times there where I was either doing really, really well and I was absolutely flying and making a lot of money, or the absolute opposite to that. And so it kind of, when I decided to leave and come back, it was for my mental well-being.
Right.
That was the reason that I left New York to come back.
Because I think we were already touching on some themes there, but we both just said how there's a perception of how you might be seen that affects your behavior. So the perception of you failing if you come home is what you thought. Yeah, your family wouldn't think that, your friends wouldn't think that, but that's what we build up. So that's kind of where we want to get the bulk of this content in. And again, please do input your questions and comments, because I think this is an area that all men can resonate with. Is about when you returned, so I think it was 2016 to the UK. So you've been away for 10 years. That also probably some of the most important developmental years of your career, sort of early 20s, early 30s. Come back, did you have to restart? And what was your mindset around that? Was it kind of like, right, I'm excited, I'm motivated, or was it, have I made the right decision?
It was, I had to start my life again from scratch. I went from having a full client base in New York City, different opportunities, relationships, friendships, to coming back to nothing. No business, no gym to work out of, no clients, no contacts. My friendship group that I grew up with had also, we remained friends and are very close to this day, but we'd also kind of gone in different directions in our life. So I came back and I just felt like I didn't know anyone. And I didn't. I mean, I saw those friends that I grew up with, but really, the crux of it was that I just didn't have any friends. So I found myself in a series of relationships that didn't work out. And it kind of, I was just searching for the wrong thing and that comfort and whatever, So it was extremely challenging to kind of, when it took me a while to realize it, but navigating a new landscape. London didn't feel like home to me. It had changed so much. Although I'd kind of come back, and done short trips, it felt like a new place to me, even though I had grown up here.
Yeah. And I think that obviously there was things there, and hindsight, it's really easy for us to talk like this. You can appreciate what was going on in your mind. And I think the point that you make there about us looking for happiness in the wrong places, and I think that's something that everyone is probably becoming more aware of at the moment, that this whole I'll be happy when thinking doesn't really exist. But 2018, your life literally couldn't have been turned on its head anymore. Would you mind telling us a little bit about what happened, but also where you were at personally when it did happen? And I think what position you're in to deal with such a challenge.
Do you know what I'll probably, the thing is with this is I think I'll go back in saying that I never really understood anxiety, depression, anxiety, how it formulated, whether that be social anxiety, which I've definitely experienced a number of times and many times over the years. And that was kind of where you were talking about, the not going out thing. For me, it was like I had this fear of going out. Right. Because even though I can get in front of a group of 100 people and easily teach a great group class, people would think I'm a real extrovert. I'm actually quite introverted. And so, I can't count the amount of times that I would cancel a night out with people because I just wanted to be on my own or just stay at home. And so, but I never really put two and two together. I never understood that I had this social anxiety. I just felt, I didn't really know why I didn't want to go out, but it just felt good to stay in. But I also turned down a lot of opportunities because of that, and also said no to a lot of stuff that I probably could have said yes to. And I don't have any regrets, and I don't ever think back to what I could or should have done. But I often think about how my life would have been different if I had have gone down those routes. Yeah. However, it took me a while to really understand it, and what I'll talk about next is where I started to piece all this together. But in 2018, I'd been back in the UK for a few years, and I'd started a business, like a pop-up boxing gym. This was the thing for me. I came back, I started doing some PT, I started working with a few people, had a few opportunities, but I needed to do my own thing. And so I came up with this idea, okay, I'm going to get this rig built, I'm going to do a pop-up boxing studio. I went out, I found pop-up spaces, I launched it, and I did it. And as most people think, wow, that's really cool, you started your own business. But for me, that's just what I've always done.
It's your action thing.
Yeah, it's like to me, it's like, right, if I don't have a job or an opportunity, I create one. Cool. So I opened this boxing studio. I had this part of the journey, and I had this pain in my arm that was around for 5 years maybe. And I'd been to doctors in New York as well. They'd given me ultrasounds, they kind of looked at, but they'd always just said it's like a torn ligament or a torn muscle or a tear, or, then, I went to a doctor in London and they did an ultrasound on it and they looked at it and they said it's like a calcified kind of injury. And it took going to a few different doctors before there was a doctor at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital who said, let's just have a look and see what's in there. So I went in for surgery August 2018. They opened it up and sent me home with, literally the doctor said to me, you're fine. I've seen this kind of thing before. I've seen bad stuff before. You're good. A few weeks recovery, 4 weeks, you'll be back, no problem. And so I just sort of went about my life. And it was the day after, or 2 days after, I got the okay from my doctor to start training again. After this surgery. It's quite a minor surgery. I mean, I went under, but it wasn't anything really big. That I got this really kind of weird call from a doctor saying I needed to go in for more scans, and that was kind of the start of that. And yeah, so a few days later, I had a follow-up appointment to these scans, and I walked into a room, and sitting there was a doctor and a McLelland cancer nurse, and it was
worrying sign,
pretty heavy, yeah. So I found out that I had a soft tissue sarcoma. Okay. It was only stage 2, luckily. The doctors told me that was probably due to my somewhat healthy lifestyle. And I will say it was a healthy lifestyle, more healthy than most. Yeah. That stopped that tumor from spreading any further. Right. So after that surgery, I had to have lung scans, and I had to have blood tests and some other biopsies, but that wasn't even really the hardest part. I had a second surgery where they went in and removed a larger portion of the muscle, so the recovery from that was a bit longer. And again, that wasn't even the hardest part, but it was the follow-up appointment where they told me the plan was, because this was an extremely rare and aggressive type of cancer, I had to have checkups for the next 10 years. before they say you're good.
Really?
And those checkups were every 3 months for the first 2 years. They go to every 6 months, which they are currently,
Okay.
until it gets to about 5 years. And then they'll take it probably to an annual checkup.
So, I mean, it's quite hard to figure out what exactly must have been going through your mind. But the thing that I always think about with cancer is it's not just a physical disease. When you go through the treatment, every 3 months, you can't rest easy, can you?
No.
3 months is pretty intense with this sort of follow-up stuff. So how heavy did that weigh on you? Were you able to put it to the back of your mind, or was it, you know what it's like, the first thing in the morning you wake up and you think, you don't remember those things, and then they come into your head and you think, oh no, that is real, and actually that is a bit annoying. Is that something that you have to manage, or how is it for you to manage?
You know, I'm always very honest about this. When I tell someone, oh yeah, I had a cancer diagnosis, they're always like, oh wow, do you mind talking about it? 100% I'll talk about it, because it was that experience that kind of changed my life for the better. And so with this, when I got that cancer diagnosis, it started to bring up a lot of stuff that had been lurking around, I think, for a long time. But, you know, and I always liken it to this. If you go and get a biopsy done, for most people, the worry that you have there, the anxiety up to where they give you those results is really hard. Most people can't comprehend that unless they've had it done themselves or they had to do that. For me, it was like every 3 months, I felt that feeling. And during that time, I never got to really rest easy. I'd just sit there thinking, what's the next one going to hold? Every ache, every pain, every feeling I had, if there was a lump somewhere, just, you know, it started to give me this fear. And I mean, it's weird. It didn't creep up, but it just came out of nowhere. And all of a sudden, I just couldn't. I went into this depression, and it was like someone just put a shroud over the top of my head. And I always use this, like I always say, it's like someone put a duvet over your head, and everything's muffled, and you can't really see, and it feels really tight and claustrophobic. And that was the next sort of period of my life.
So,
you know,
because I think that's the interesting point that you make there, that there were these warning signs or these triggers there all the time, but probably the diagnosis and then the anxiety about the regular checkups really escalated that, and that led to a tipping point at which it was too much to deal with. Something again that people probably watching, and we've all become more aware of what depression is and what the signs and symptoms are, but for you mentioned there about like having something over your head. What was your mindset like? Were you still functioning day to day? Did it affect your ability to do what you do and love, or was it something that you could hide? Because I think that's the challenging thing with men, is like, I'll be honest with you, like some mornings, a lot of mornings we all wake up, find it difficult. In the jobs that we do, you often have to outwardly present, and you have to be a certain person in a certain way. And some mornings you wake up and think, I want to sit and just have a desk job today, and I don't want to be that guy. But you get over it and you find your ways to manage it. And I think that's natural. But for you, it was probably more than that. So yeah, what's your view of what was it like for you?
Do you know, I'll go back a little bit, and I always tell this story because it was a big part of my life, and I think I always refer back to it because I think this was really the pivotal time in my life where I realized that there was more to exercise than just an aesthetic goal. I had a client in New York City named Brett Kilroy, and it's not a name that most people will know, but you'd probably have seen some of his work. He was an artist. He designed album artwork. So he did like the ODB, like it's like a welfare card. It's a really famous album. He did albums for Missy Elliott, the Kings of Leon, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Queens of the Stone Age, like really big, you know, he's huge. And he was an art director for the Kings of Leon. And when he first came into the gym to start working with me, he had stage 4 cancer. I think it was a liver cancer. And he came in there, and it was the first thing he said to me. And I said, well, why do you want to train? And he said, I just don't want to die on the sofa.
Wow.
And it just, I mean, that to me was the more time I spent with him. Sadly, he passed away back in like 2016. But it was that time I spent with him that I just started to realize more and more that there was more to why we exercised in this kind of aesthetic journey. And, you know, during that sort of time when I was coming out of that, when I got the diagnosis and I was feeling this horrible anxiety and depression, I used to always try and think of him and him in that situation. But it was hard, and I couldn't just get up every day and be this kind of extroverted person that I was able to do, you know. And I'd actually set up like a retreat on a farm in Devon. I was going to do this whole thing with my glove. It was called Glove London, was my pop-up boxing studio. So I was going to do this glove retreat, and I marketed it and I put it out there, and I actually had people sign up for it. And it's probably like 3 weeks after I put it all together and I had people ready to go, I had this moment where I just went, I am not in the right place mentally to be doing that kind of thing. How can I help people with their mental well-being, and if I haven't taken care of my own?
Yeah, of course.
And so I moved to Bali.
Was I mean, yeah, that's what I meant to do, isn't it? It's funny though, you know, like people often think it's selfish to put yourself first, but it's the most selfless thing that you can do, because if you're not in a good place, you can't be in a good place for other people. You can't support, and I think that's something that we should all get used to and get comfortable with. With the whole Bali thing, was that a escape? Did you think, I need to reset? Were you aware of the place that you were in, or was it something that you thought, no, I know that I need to change my life here, and this is what I'm going to do?
I was very aware of the place I was in, because I was conscious of how I was feeling every single day, and I found myself like comfortable talking to people. I've got a very close relationship with my mum, and I definitely would like talk to her about it, tell her how I felt. I've got sort of, you know, maybe a couple of friends that I could talk to. That was really hard to find someone that I could actually kind of really confide in. And I remember just sitting there and thinking, I need to go somewhere, like take my head to a different place geographically, and find a different kind of outlook on life. And Bali was originally just going to be a few weeks to reset, kind of, you know, just make myself feel better, get some sun. It was right in the middle of winter. It was like, this is going to make me feel better.
Get on board with that.
And then as soon as I got out there, they call Bali the island of misfit toys. Everyone you meet there is healing from something. Really? Now, I always say that healing or whatever you're going through is totally subjective. It's not like, you know, well, my type of cancer wasn't as bad as this person's type of cancer. It's all subjective to you and your feelings, right? It doesn't matter if you have an ankle injury that stops you from doing the one thing that you love, which is running. That's you. And I can't sit there and say, well, I had cancer, so what's your problem? Because that's not how it works.
Yeah, sure.
So I met all these people who were on this real healing journey just to make themselves better and better humans, and it really resonated with me. And I sort of realized I can't go back to London and that old way of thinking, in that place where, you know, I felt so dark. I need to stay here where I feel nurtured a little bit, you know. And, you know, I go back to this because when I tell people this story, I don't want it to come like, oh, you know, a lot of people couldn't just jump on a plane and go to Bali. And I was lucky enough, I was in that position at the time when I could. But, you know, now I know more about it. This is where I can help people understand that you don't have to remove yourself from that geographical location, but just taking yourself to a different place, whether that be nature or outside of your everyday life, just for a second to kind of stop and smell the roses. Because that's when I got there and everything kind of made sense. For the first time, I realized there was a reason why I got cancer. All of this stuff had been lurking around for ages. The depression, the anxiety, the social anxiety, the feeling of, you know, not being worth enough, and not doing enough in my life. And all of a sudden, this thing came along and reminded me that my life was valuable, and that just being here and doing good and helping people with their mental health and their wellness was enough. I didn't have to have a massive company that was, the vision that I had before. I didn't have to be a multi-millionaire. I didn't have to have this really successful, massive business. Why I was here was just to help other people get out of the situation that I was in before. And that's kind of where that's the start of it all. And I kind of look at that when 2018 being the start of my life.
I think you're pretty unique that you're able to say, cancer happened to me for a reason, and it's been such a positive impact. But everything that you were saying there is around like relativity, and the fact that social media obviously is a great example of this. I personally believe it can be used for good and bad. But if you are easily influenced by others, the first thing that you do is you have that comparison. You think, I should be doing this and I'm not, and therefore I'm not in a good place, and that can be a real negative spiral.
Yeah.
But what you managed to do was to take it and find your purpose, like your infinite purpose, like what you want to do and what you're comfortable with. How much of that do you think was about just acceptance of, that's cool, like I don't have to, do you know what I mean? Like, because often people talk about acceptance in terms of their feelings as well. So we're all really, really quick to run away from how you feel, because you should feel happy all the time, or you need to be peaceful or content with life. When actually, you're going to get sad at times, you're going to have low points, and that's accepting that, embracing it, and then knowing that will pass. So yours was probably a little bit bigger than just a feeling, but acceptance of, this is me, this is what I do, and I love that, and I can now just focus on that, and I don't need to worry about the pressures that come elsewhere.
Yeah. And for me, like when that all happened, and from that day I moved out to Bali and I started to realize what my purpose was, I understood that my health and my mental health was the most important thing. I want to live a long time. I want to feel good, but I also have to understand that I'm a human. Feeling bad is normal. Not being okay is normal, but you have to recognize when that lasts for long periods of time. And you have to be aware that you have to take action, as soon as possible. And I just think at that point, everything sort of made sense. And the checkups, of course I'm going to be worried about those checkups. I tried to put a positive spin on it. I thought, well, at least I'm getting checked up. So every 6 months now, I get an all clear and I'm good.
Yeah.
But I still get worried about it. It still gives me a bit of anxiety, but that's just normal. I've just made that a part of my life.
Yeah.
And, it kind of, I can't change that.
Yeah.
I don't have any control over it, at least until 10 years is gone, right? Until 2028.
Not that you can.
But, that's just how my life is now.
Yeah.
And, I want to be in a place now that I always say this, if I went back for one of those checkups and they told me that it metastasized in my lungs, which is what they're always looking at. I want to know that the period between when I got cancer and if that ever happened, again, that I made that time valuable. And I did good during that time. And I helped as many people as I could during that time. And not that it was just wasted, worrying, being depressed, unhappy, not looking after myself.
I think that's kind of what the essence of like anxiety is, looking too far to the future, simplified version, and depression might be looking too far at the past. And what I obviously the title of this is The Power of Exercise, and I want to get really into that now, because I honestly and I genuinely believe this so much, and I love it when other people do exercise, because I think it can change. I think sport can change your life 100%, and I think it can change your life for absolutely nothing to do with the physical benefit. So running has always been my thing. I want everyone to experience the fact that they can do whatever they think that they can do, because that translates into so many different elements of their life. So if you run 5K and you've never run before, the mindset that you therefore have is, well, I did that, so why can't I do this at work, or why can't I challenge myself in another way? And I think it grows and escalates, and your limit becomes just larger than it ever would be. And you probably sometimes think I can do anything, but ego is a massive thing with men and sport, and something that I am not good at. Like, I go to the gym every morning before work. You wouldn't really believe this, but I do actually do quite a lot of weights training. It wasn't that
I've
funny.
never said
That was
anything
a joke.
about that.
But the thing is with that is
I'm
that,
not
like,
laughing at you.
it's 'cause I'm loose. But with it, I always wanted to be your physique, and for years I got a little bit bigger, and I could eat as much as I possibly could, and I would lift not very heavy weight. Like you were saying, your deadlift max is like 300 or something, whereas mine
I'm not quite there yet.
made true figures, but for me,
Not quite there yet.
broke my back at the same time. But that's because I didn't really enjoy it. It was all right, it was quite good, but I was only doing it so I could look a certain way. And as soon as now I think I can be a cool runner, because that's my thing, and I can do that well. And I also think that I need to accept that these are the genes that I've been dealt, and I can work with those and maximize those. I don't need to focus on the negatives or the weaknesses. I can focus on what my strengths are.
Yeah.
And so when you obviously went through everything with your cancer, going back into the gym, you were always the strongest man in the gym. And then you go back to training and your ego tells you you weren't this anymore. So we're going to come to obviously the power of exercise and the positive, but in a men's health specific focus where it can be really, really challenging. And I think one message that I would love to get across today is about having confidence in yourself and who you are, just owning that and not feeling like you have to do anything else. So yeah, that whole returning to the gym and how that affected you.
Yeah, do you know, it's funny because this is something that I've realized more so over the past few years, but I did have a fear of going back to the gym because I'd lost so much strength, I'd lost so much size, and there was that ego that went with it. I went into the gym and I thought that everyone was watching me lifting that 60 kg deadlift.
Which is a lot, by the way. 60 is a lot of weight. I don't do that.
But it was a lot less than my kind of 1 minute max. Not 300, just to get that out there. So just so you know, but it's close to it. But I thought everyone was watching me. No one cared.
Yeah.
But in my head, I thought everyone's looking at me and going, "It's only lifting 60 kg."
Yeah.
Looking back, exercise for me was what made me feel alive when everything else around me felt like it wasn't alive. I had no depression. When you feel depression, you feel everything but nothing at the same time. Everything feels numb. Your smell, your taste, your hearing, everything feels a bit closed off. But when you're sweating and you're breathing heavy and your heart's beating, it's like it's telling you, that exercise is saying you're alive. You're alive right now in this moment. And that reminder for me was enough to get me through another day. And when I went out to Bali, I wasn't healed by no means. I went out there, the sun helped, the beach helped, the surf helped, the food helped. But when I started going back into the gym and realizing, right, this journey isn't about anyone else. This is about me. I'm going to start here. I'm going to start with what I can do right now. I'm going to start to build up again. And when I started that journey, that was the beginning of my understanding of why I do this, why I train, what I get out of it. And that is really where, that is what I try to get across to people now.
Yeah.
The power of exercise is how it makes you feel on the inside. And that is that you have a working body of some capacity if you can move. And we should just all be so grateful for that.
Yeah, I think I've always said this, like I train a lot alone. And that's cool with me. Like I like doing it in a group, but it's my thing.
Yep.
And sometimes I like it to be that as well. Like I want to spend my time on what I enjoy.
Yep.
And I can do that in so many different ways. And again, if you take out the perception of what you should be doing, you can do anything. So if you like Zumba, do Zumba. That's brilliant. Like you don't have to lift weights in the gym. You don't have to look a certain way.
Yep.
And I think that something that men could, this is obviously all of these comments are generalized, but I think as a whole, it's probably fair to say, aren't the best at supporting other men sometimes, because I go in a gym and you walk into a weight section, women have definitely seen this, where it's a pretty intimidating place to be. Fortunately, that's obviously changing, and I really like the fact that there's a lot of body positivity around women, and women want to support women no matter what they look like. Why do you think, from your experience though, men don't do that as much? And I've not seen it whereby we can just accept and appreciate a man's physique for what it is.
I think there's as much stigma. Like, don't get me wrong, you know, women really get this through the media, you know, through every magazine outlet that's out, you know, these trashy magazine outlets that put up shaming pictures of, you know, female bodies. But equally for men, there is this stigma, this idea that, you know, you pick up a Men's Health and it's like, get bigger arms, like you've got to look like Mark Wahlberg or whatever it might be, get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and train. So it's as much of that feeling, that insecurity, that we just can't be comfortable with our bodies if we're not really lean. And that is put out through, you know, marketing all over the world. And it's terrible. But, you know, I always say this, it's about understanding this, right? There's a part of your brain that can easily tell you, you're not good enough. If you can move, if you're looking after your body, you're eating well, you know, and by eating well, I don't mean just eating healthy all the time, you know, enjoying the food that you eat, right? Living, but looking after your body as well, not doing things to damage your body. And training because you enjoy it. If you do all those things, that's enough. That's what we need to do, but we need to accept and be grateful for that. If you want to go and get really strong, go and do that because it makes you happy, not because you're trying to get stronger than me or someone else. It should only be for you. It's your journey, it's no one else's.
And I think that is like everything that we want to encourage. I think that it can be for you as well, because you want to look great. So I think that, you know, if aesthetics is in 100% what you want and you feel like it will make you feel better, and if it does, then amazing. But as long as it's not you're doing it because you think that's the right thing to do. Where do you think you're at though? So I went to a class last night. It's one of these like bougie gyms. Everyone was in ridiculous shape. It was a Versa climber class. Right. You ever done them?
No, I haven't actually.
So it's like it's that motion. It's like climbing sort of thing.
Cardio.
Good cardio. And it was my first time doing it, and I was like, this is awkward. The movement's awkward. I wasn't very good at it. People in there were super fit, like people getting their tops off, and I was there like, I don't know how I feel about this. Like, I feel a bit conscious right now. Can you go into a gym now and say, I don't care what you're doing, I'm literally 100% in this for myself? Or do you still, because I haven't ever, like, I do what I do because I like it. But I still have that element of I want to look a certain way.
I think that everyone has some kind of competitive nature in them. So there's definitely that competitiveness in me. I do want to lift heavier than the person next to me. But equally, whenever I get out of that space, I'm not competitive anymore. Because I walk away from that and I feel better, and I feel better here, right? I feel better here. So everything that I was doing in there was just a part of that.
Right.
But the real goal and the real kind of the what I'm looking for is that feeling that I get when I leave. So what you're doing in there, if you're competing against another person, if competition is your thing, if you have that insecurity or whatever it might be, just you've always got to draw it back to why are you doing this, right? Like, what is the real depth of it? Sure, you might want to get stronger. You might want to get in better shape. That's fine. That's your goal. That's fine. But really deep down, what is it? I think when you understand that, that is the start of it all. That's where you really understand why we have these amazing bodies and we are capable of doing things. It's just insane if you sit there and think about what we have, right? And how our bodies work. And if you're not sitting there and being appreciative of the fact that you can just put one foot in front of the other and walk down the street and that, you know, because not to mention that so many people don't have that privilege.
Of course,
and can't do that. But, you know, you are a human being that, you know, that can breathe and has a heart, and that's amazing in itself.
I want to train with you, Tom. If you actually check out on YouTube, Tom and I did a workout not too long ago, and it was great. And I'm going to come, and he's going to.
You did the workout. I think I just kind of.
Actually, the old coach. I want to touch on one final thing before we kind of wrap up today. And thank you everyone for your questions. We've seen them come in, but one question that we've definitely got, and something again that we should be highlighting is, if you're not the person affected though, how do you support others? So for example, in your experience, when you said to your friends and you're very open and probably vulnerable to what you're going through, what was their response like, firstly? But then secondly, what did you need? Because I think as someone who's a supporter of someone going through something, you want to make it better straight away. And that's actually maybe not what they need. Maybe they need you to just be normal. But in your experience, like, how did they react and what did you need from them?
Do you know, I think I expected too much from my friends, and I didn't take into account that maybe they just didn't understand how to help someone with mental health issues. So there was a point where I got really I played the victim a bit, and I was like, you haven't even reached out to me, even though you know that I'm going through this stuff. It's not their job to do that. We can support each other by listening and understanding, but you can't just expect someone to do that for you, because we can never expect that they know how to deal with someone with mental health issues. We have some amazing resources right now. Human is an incredible resource. It's a men's group. They're online. You can go from wherever you like in the world. It's Humen, Humen.
Okay.
Incredible organization, incredible movement, and I've done some work with them in terms of like some charity work that I've done. I did a 75-mile walk, which was incredibly challenging, 19 hours. Don't know how I'd managed to do it, called the end of it, but these resources are there. Calm, mental health and mind, and these charities, Salvation Army, Samaritans. I'm sorry, Salvation Army, Samaritans. And what we can do, for one part, is support those movements by doing fundraising, by increasing awareness, because those are the real organizations, the resources that we need to help people. But if you are a person that, has or suspects someone might need that little bit of help, just be open to talking and listening. You don't have to give someone advice, because that's not always the best thing. When you come to someone with a problem and they say, well, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Have you tried exercising? You don't want to hear that. All you want is to get that off your chest and talk about it. If you want to go and find out how exercise can help your mental health, go and look into avenues that will help you with that. Talk to those professionals that will help you get into exercise, that will help you with your mental health. Find something that you enjoy, find something you find fun. But don't, that's when you're a support network. You can't just be the person, giving people answers to that, even if you've experienced it for yourself. I don't sit there and say, sorry to interrupt, but I don't sit there ever and say, guys, go out there, exercise or save you. I can only talk about my experience with it and hope that someone might hear that and say, do you know what? That might help me too.
I think that's a massive point, is that you said at the start about something small to you is your whole world though. So it's okay to be affected by it, and you can't relate to others, and we shouldn't feel like we need to. I think it's a really nice human quality, don't get me wrong, that you want to help, but actually you just got to know what might help more than others. I'm going to come to the final question for today. You've shared loads of stuff, Tom. Honestly, I think this kind of thing, if I reflect on my life, in my friendship group from school and everyone that I know, I can't think of one friend of mine that's ever come and been open and said, I'm struggling with my mental health. But we know this, even with as few friends as I have, the statistics are that you're going to have a friend that's suffering from that. So, I've sat here and just listened to, I had a plan. It's been terrible. I've lost none of it, but I've got so much from it. And just talking and listening is important. But we're trying to create like a common theme for the ending of these sessions. And so I had always said this from a young age, and I don't know where it's come from, and I've kind of stuck with it. I don't really know if I like it, but it's what I always say, is that in my life, I want to do two things. So I want to live to 100, and I want to get knighted because I feel like that'd be a cool thing to do.
Right.
And so what I want to ask you is, what do you believe is possible for you, or what is it that you would like to achieve in your life? And I'll give you some reasoning behind this, is that I want people to not be scared of saying big things, to be ambitious, and to not feel like, oh, it's embarrassing if he says that, or why shouldn't you be shy? Why should you have to feel shy to think that you can do anything? Because the power of exercise has taught me that I can run a marathon. I can probably run 100 miles in a day. You walk 10, like there's so much more to it.
Yeah.
So what do you think is possible? What's your aspirations?
The first thing, if I have an aspiration in my life from now, it's that what I do with the rest of it makes an impact over anything else, over making money, building a successful business, whatever that might be. It's that I can make an impact. Why I do the work I do now is so that I can get a louder voice. That's it. I just want people to hear my story and hope that it might just help one person. I'm not trying to reach millions of people. If it reaches 1 million people, then I'm really happy. But if it reaches one person and that person goes and finds help, then that I feel like I've done my job.
Yeah.
There's not much more. I'm not trying to sit here like a guru, you know, that's saying, you know, this is, but there's not really much more that I could ask for in my life. My aspiration now is really just to use that experience that I went through to try to help other people understand their journey. And, you know, besides that, just trying to be a good person. We all make mistakes and we do things that maybe we could have done differently. But to me now, it's just about trying to be a decent person and help people when I can help people. And, you know, talking about, just going back briefly, but talking to people, you know, even if there's not someone within your friendship group that you feel like you can talk to, the resources that we have out there are huge. And I just think that we're lucky, you know, in that we have those resources. And so, yeah, I can't really think of an aspiration beyond that.
It's a nice one.
It's not like
it's never going to end.
Yeah, I don't want to, like, I'd love to do more for mental health movements. I'd love to kind of take more action in that area, which I will do. Yeah. Because I take action. That's what I do.
Yeah, I'm not doubting that.
But it really, you know, I can't aspire to much more than just living my life and actually making my time on this planet the best I can, you know, because it could all end, and it could, you know, I don't ever want to think if you know, touch wood, and I don't ever feel like this is going to be the way, but if I ever went into the appointment that told me that my cancer was back, I don't want to ever feel that period of time I didn't do what I was aspiring to do.
Have you ever heard of a guy called McLelland?
Yeah.
Yeah, so his son died. There's a really good podcast that I definitely,
I've heard it. Yeah, I've heard it.
It's amazing, and it's basically how he used the experience of his son dying, which is similarly, it's never going to be a positive, but he's taken from that, what would his son want him to do, and what does he want to do with his life now? And it's exactly that's to help other people and spread that message. So, Tom, I think that you are going to build your platform because you talk so brilliantly on it. And I think the other reason, and this is kind of what we're trying to do as well, it's so authentic. It's not about becoming a bigger name and more recognized for a personal sort of financial, anything like that. It's more so that you can reach more people. So we've had a conversation today. I've loved it. And hopefully people that have listened in as well have just wanted to go and continue this sort of thing, you know, speak to your friends, reach out, just check in. Doing these little things makes a really big difference. And I think one thing that I've always said, I have a more clinical background and I've done health assessments and a lot of our members. And people define their health too much by exactly how they look. And there's so much more to it than that. And I think we need to stop looking across the room and saying that person's healthy or unhealthy or whatever they say about them. And we do it naturally, but you've got to check yourself. And when you do that, you can start checking others and you can start to change the way you think. So I think that there's so many strong themes from what you said today, but confidence in yourself, being a good person to other people, the two things that I just think is universal and we can all get on board with. So
absolutely.
Thank you for sharing all of that.
You're welcome. Thanks for listening.
Amazing.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, hopefully everyone's still with us. Tom, where can we find you? Obviously, so Virgin Active, all Vitality members have access to 50% of your gyms, and I would highly recommend that. They are so good. You personally, I don't know, anything that you want to share?
I'm head of athletic training at Virgin Active. We're currently building an amazing athletic training program in Virgin Active. I'm also a talent trainer at Techno Gym. You can find me on the Techno Gym app if you want to train with me in the App Store. Tom X McLelland on Instagram. And yeah, I'm just sharing my life and things that I think might help people.
Amazing. Check it out. And I'm going to go to one of Tom's classes because they look really good.
Yes, you are.
There'll be a feedback form that pops up. I'm a bit nervous about that, by the way. There'll be a feedback form that pops up at the end. Please do let us know what you think. In the handout section as well, you've also got our monthly program for November. So please share far and wide. Continue with the conversation. And thanks so much for joining. In the meantime, take care, and we'll see you all soon.
Thanks very much.